Hi folks, I'm Roger from Offgrid Vanlife, and in this episode we will be taking a very close look at this Juntek battery monitor. So this is the KG140F. Yep. And this was supplied to us by Zhentek to review and to come back to them with any suggestions. So this is that very detailed review of this. At the same time, we have compared it with the very well-known Victron SmartShunt because we wanted to have a baseline to compare against. We've also had a good look at the application that comes with a daily BMS that protects our battery. So 3 systems that we've looked at, so we'll be covering those. So this is the KG140F made by Zhentek. And let's have a look inside here. So you have a user manual, sort of normal stuff. You have in here, this I believe is the display unit that will be used to mount somewhere. We have done a review on this before, a basic look at it, but now we'll do a more detailed review. This is the base unit that plugs into the shunt, and so that is the unit that plugs into the SmartShunt, which is in here. So here is the SmartShunt. Let's take it out of its packet. As you can see what it looks like. So basically it's exactly what you'd expect to see on a SmartShunt. Interestingly, it doesn't have any mounting points other than these things here, which you'd put these onto here, and then you see they've got some holes here so that you can screw them onto something. I guess straight off the bat, the biggest criticism I have, the first criticism I have, is that the mounting was a real afterthought on this. So basically, this plugs into this with a short lead. By short, I mean it's just a few centimeters or a few inches. So this plugs into this, and then there is a longer lead, which is this bundle of wire here, that goes from this to that. So you have to bear in mind that when you mount these, this goes right at your battery. This is pretty much right next to it, so you can screw it into something. It's got these. It's quite convenient. There's nothing on the back, so you can screw it flat onto something. But when we look at this display unit, the biggest criticism I have is that the plug comes off the back. So you have to make like a housing for it to go onto, because you can't just simply plug it on the side or something like that and screw this against a flat surface. So because this comes out the back, it does add some challenges in terms of how you're going to mount it. We found that practically we had to make a housing for this. So if you're going to use this, just bear in mind you will have 2 constraints. This cable, and I'll measure it to tell you exactly how long it is, and that this will need to be mounted somewhere quite close by, restricted by the length of the cable and the fact that you have to make a mounting unit to mount this display onto. This is fairly easy. You just, as I said, this is a bit of a challenge to mount because these are an afterthought that they built, but they should have actually given it more thought and design. Basically made a design so that you could mount this on properly, and yeah, this comes close to that. So let's just take a brief look at the Victron so that you can compare. So out the box, this is the Victron. So again, you get a manual. Here is the SmartShunt. You can see they've given more thought to how it's going to be mounted. So you've got substantial screw holes in the sides here, and you mount it. These are where your negative cables will run through. And then they've got these 2. It's very elementary. You can use this thing here to connect to their VE direct system. And this you would connect to your positive, and maybe if you wanted to something else, an auxiliary like maybe your starter engine voltage, just to monitor that as well. So that is basically the whole unit. The rest are just cables. So this is for your positive with a fuse, and I'm not sure why We have a second, well, the second one would be perhaps to run from the starter battery. So maybe one for your, just to actually power it from the battery, from your positive, and one from your starter battery. So that would be pretty much, this is what you get in the Victron. Very simple to install and get going. So let's cover what comes in the box of the two SmartShunts. We'll start with the Victron SmartShunt. I love these Victron units. We sell a lot of Victron kit, and I just love the Victron kit. It's very, very good. Very simple, very easy to install, very robust, usable. So the Victron SmartShunt comes with three bits of hardware in this white box with a tiny little manual. And basically you have the SmartShunt itself, the fused cable for connecting to your leisure battery positive, or your habitation battery positive, a second cable to probably attach to your starter battery, your positive, so that you can monitor that at the same time. And obviously on the SmartShunt you will connect, this goes to your battery minus, or comes from the BMS to here, and then from here to your system, to your load and your charging system. So current will need to flow through this both ways. So that's actually as simple as it gets. It's really simple, really easy. All you do is you screw these through these two screws. You can mount this very securely, very easily. Plug the other things in. You've got a V direct plug if you want to have external displays and that. So you can connect this to a V direct system, a Victron system, which is quite handy. It makes it nicely expandable if you want some nice heads-up displays, etc. This very reasonably costed. I think they're about 120 pounds, $140 or somewhere around there. But yeah, that's the rough price range of these. Simple box, simple packaging, simple system, works really well. The Zhentek, they used to supply a much simpler system, but this is way more advanced. So as I said, this is the KG140F that Zhentek supplied to us to put through its paces. Let me take you through the unit. So we start with the shunt itself. Very little on here, just a connector to come to the base unit. They've, as an afterthought, they've got this to mount it with, which you put onto you got one on each side to go in the actual terminals, and then you can screw them down into something. Not much thought given to this, unfortunately, and I just can't give Juntek high marks for mounting this thing, because they did this afterwards, as I said. Whereas Victron have, right from the start, you can mount this thing easily. The Zhentek, you've got to figure out a way of mounting it. Because we were comparing these two, we've actually connected them in series, and we actually bolted this onto here. So that worked really well for us, to bolt one onto the other. But not everybody's going to install both systems, why would you? Right, so the SmartShunt, well, this is just a shunt. It connects to then the base unit via the small cable. So that sort of forms the SmartShunt, and you can connect to that via your mobile device using Bluetooth, and do everything you need to do just with that. But you also have this 3-meter cable, and I don't know what this cable is. Somebody can maybe leave some comment saying what they think it is. I've tried to get a longer cable but failed. Zhentek, yeah, just give us a comment and tell us what this cable actually is. Anyway, 3 meters from the base unit to this display unit that goes in your van or your boat or your motorhome, your cottage, or whatever it is. So you're limited to 3 meters. It's not wireless. Zhentek, take note. If you could make this wireless, that would be great. If you could make it wireless so that we can just power this with a USB or something like that, that would be really great. A very niggly thing that's quite irritating. Just as you failed with how you would actually mount this thing, you've completely failed with this, because you plug in at the back. So it means you can't just put it against a surface with, say, a long thin screw or something like that. You have to make a mounting unit to put this into, because it plugs in at the back. I think for a little bit of extra, you could have allowed people to plug in at the back or one of the sides, or rather just plug in at one of the sides than at the back. And that would have meant that we could have just mounted this straight onto something without having to make a housing and recess it into there, etc. So that's a bit of a niggly thing where I think you could do it much better. And I know that like the heads-up displays for Victron also would require all of that, but still, it would have been great if you just made it really easy to mount this. But with the SmartShunt, this Zhentek, you get a temperature probe so that you can run this as a sort of a fallback to protect your battery in terms of temperature, and that you can set this all up to protect the battery in a number of ways to act as a secondary line of defense, which is quite nice. And they supply some plugs in it to do things like that, and they're fairly standard plugs that you can use. You can see, well, no, sorry, not here, on the base unit, you can see there are standard plug configurations, and there's quite a lot that you can do in terms of relays and things like that. A lot going on here. So you can use it very simply as we did, or you can become way more complicated with relays and that. So let's take you through what we actually found. And at the end of that, we'll tell you what we have decided to stick with in the long term. So to test both of the shunts together, I have mounted the Victron coming straight off the BMS of the battery, the Juntek bolted to that, which then goes out to the load. For the Zhentek, I've needed to have this little base unit here, and I just simply pass this cable, black cable, up to the top, just sort of loosely going along up there to the unit above. So this is the app that works with the Juntek KG140F SmartShunt. So the app is called VA-KG or whatever you'd call it here. So that's it there. And it has connected. I mean, normally you would need to search here and find your device there, connect to it. And it connects very, very quickly, gets its data very, very, very quickly. So let's run through this now. So this is the app on the phone. If we look at the, if you see, the landscape mode is actually pretty useless. It's completely unusable actually. So really you need to use it in portrait like that. So let's run through all of the menu options and take you in detail through everything on this app. So I wanted to take you through the app that works with the KG140 something F here. So this VA-KG is the application that you use, and let's go into it. So it's currently connected to there. When you first go in, it would basically show something that says not connected to anything. You click on the search button, you choose your BT, whatever. That connects very rapidly, gets its data, and it displays everything that you need. Let's go through this one menu at a time. So on the top, we've got main curve setting and about us. So we'll come back to main shortly. The curve just shows you a little bit of history. I've not actually bothered with it because I just don't need it. It's maybe it's of use to somebody I don't know. The setting is where you can set your protection function, relay mode, a low capacity alarm, that sort of thing, set various addresses. And it's handy if you're using this to use relays to protect your battery and that sort of thing. This is connected to a temperature probe, so quite handy from that point of view too, as an extra line of defense for your battery in case the BMS fails, I guess. Anyway, the About Us is simply just going to give you the version and the official website. I think with the version in theory, let's click on version. Okay, it's not actually doing anything. Not sure if it's meant to go to a version tab and be able to update. It's not, when I click version, it's not doing anything. Come back to main. Right, this is what opens up when you first go into the app. So let's spend a bit of time going through this. Everything that's on here is also on the display unit, slightly different layout, but let's go through this in detail and see just how useful it is. So you've got a voltage reading, and they've taken up quite a lot of space to show it on a dial plus a number. I think that's a bit too blingy. I would just be happy to know it as 13.23, quite frankly. You can click on that and set the voltage range. So that'll just change the display. But again, to my mind, I want it simple. I just want it 13.23. The current is a similar sort of thing where you can set the current range. Again, I'm not interested. I just want to know that it's currently drawing 4.2 amps. So quite a lot of space wasted here. There's other stuff that I would have found more useful. Now we get to, we'll come back to this, which is the most important part to my mind. Let's start with this. Not clickable, so the power, you can't do anything with that. The energy consumption, you can't do anything. So those are just showing you those two things. Fairly useful, so 55 watts, and it's 30.3 kilowatt hours that it's drawing. So this is the current cleaning or clearing rather, and the data clearing. I haven't bothered with these. And external temperature, you can set the calibration, and runtime doesn't, you can't click anything. So it's a bit of hit miss as to what you can and can't click. Certain things you can click and certain things you can't, but that's fine. Let's cover the bottom part, which to my mind is fairly useless. So this figure is the most useless to me. This is elapsed amp hours that's gone in or out. I just don't see the point of it really. And it's not clickable. The battery left, number of minutes, I presume that's 236 minutes left based on the current draw rate. Again, the internal resistance, so it's 294. It's, I've measured it when we built the battery. I don't care about that anymore. That's could have been on another tab of additional info to my mind. We get to the really important stuff. These are the two most, so I'd like to know the current, the voltage is on a lithium iron phosphate is not really neither here nor there, so I don't really care about that, to be honest. I am cared about the current, but mostly I want to know how many amp hours I've used. This is showing how many remain. That's okay-ish. I would have preferred to see how many have actually been used up, but why not take away some of the bling and just put in amp hours remaining and amp hours used? Quite simple. Now, if you want to set how big your battery is, so your preset battery amp hour, you click on this setting here, and then you can put in your 280 or 300 or whatever you have over there. Fine. And then here, if you click on this battery, that allows you to tell it the current remaining capacity. So this 84% is what it has calculated. I'm quite happy with that. That is accurate. So when you count down the amp hours that it's used and do the math, it is 84%. Interestingly, if I come to the Smart BMS application, there's my battery there. It's saying 87. So very 1% difference, but I think that's just the way that they do the calculation. So that's I'm quite pleased that the BMS agrees quite strongly with this. Actually 84 versus 87, that is actually quite a big difference. I'm not sure who's right, whether it's this or this, to be honest. That's one of the funny things. But let's go to the next app, which is the Victron Shunt we were comparing. Takes quite a while to fetch the data. It's saying it's 89%, so we got an 84, an 89, and an 86, 3 different readings, but it is showing that we have used 45 amp hours, so I don't see how they get to 89%. Do the math, it doesn't work out. Bit of a strange thing of Victron there. So 45 amp hours that we have used, whereas in this one here they are basically saying we have used 44 amp hours. So 44, 45, very close. So the Victron app and this app are very close to each other in terms of how many amp hours we've actually used. If we do the maths, this 84% is the most correct, is the closest to what we think it should be. So both the Daily app and the Victron app are showing a different percentage. Usefulness of the screen, I would have liked to have seen, to be honest, I don't need to see a great big picture of a battery and how much it's green and how much is black. It's okay, but I would like to know in very bold font somewhere what the percentage is. That must jump out at me big time. And how much has been used and how much is remaining. Those would, if I only had those three figures, how much is remaining, how much is used, and the percentage, I would be happy. This is additional info that's useful but not critical. Yes, it is nice to know how many amps you're drawing at any one time, but and the voltage is pretty useless to me because it's such a flat curve on this battery. I think if you're on lead acid it's handy, but on lithium it's not really of much use to show the voltage. So basically, let's agree 4 things. You want to know the amperage, how many amp hours remaining, how many used, and the total percentage. That's the important stuff that you want to see. The rest is all extra, which should be on like an extra info page. If we look at what the Victron is showing, I don't like the fact that it has to refetch the data every time. They've shown the percentage very clearly, the amp hours consumed very clearly, and a few other odds and ends. Very uncluttered display. It shows you all of the important information in one go. So in this view, I'm showing you the the display unit mounted in the van. So on the left here, where I'm waving the cursor, is a realistic view of the display unit from where I sit in the van. And this is where I'd like to just look up, glance up and see the important information on this here. So we've needed to make the special mounting. As you've seen on the right, it shows it in far more detail. Special mounting to hold the unit because the cable comes out of the back. So the cable this cable here that attaches the display unit to its base unit, which is a 3 meter long cable, comes out, it plugs into the back of this thing, which is a real pain. Zhentek, if you're listening to this, one of the first changes I would definitely make is that the display cable must come from the side or the bottom or the top, it doesn't matter, one of the sides or the bottom top, but not out the back. If it, as it does now, if it comes out of the back, it means that you can't simply use double-sided tape to stick this unit against somewhere in the van. You have to make a sort of a holding thing like I've done here to hold it. So this I did temporarily, although I did actually screw this in, which I'm not that happy but I did it in a hurry just before going on a trip. So Zhentek give some more thought to how this is going to be mounted and not have a plug come out of the back. Or even better, have both, charge another $1 or £1 more for this thing and have it possible to plug it in 2 places so that you can have it more convenient. Now, this on the left is the realistic view sitting in my favorite seat where I'd like to glance up and look at it. And as I will cover later on, realistically, you cannot see the most important information that you want to know from where you're sitting. So you can't glance up and look at this. You actually have to get up from where you're sitting. So if you're watching something or eating or whatever, you have to get up, walk across the van, look at that, or you have to get your mobile device out and look at the app to see what is going on. So just a heads up, Zhentek, if you're listening, you need to make the 2 most important bits of information really big and bold so that you can glance across a motorhome or a boat or whatever it is that you've got this thing mounted in, just to see the most important information. And here is a bit of a heads up. The important information is not the voltage or the amperage. Absolutely not. That is of secondary interest or consideration. So we just mounted this cable loose just to see if we were going to keep this. We'll cover later on whether we're going to stick with this or not. We'll go back to our Victron SmartShunt, or whether we'll continue to use both for a while. But I will take you through that later on. The cable is only 3 meters long. I don't actually know what it is. Zhentek don't say what it is. Again, Zhentek, you should give some options to have a longer cable. But actually, here's a real trick. You want to actually make this thing wireless and powered by USB. Some of your other devices are along those lines, and I think that is really handy. So my suggestion, develop your next iteration of this for this to be completely wireless and powered by USB. Right, so you have to tuck this cable, this 3 meter long cable, if you manage to find out what it is. I'd appreciate knowing in the comments what kind of cable this is, so we can get a much longer one. I'd like to try a 5 meter one so that I can move this from where it is now to where I have my other displays in the van, so that they're all in one place, and that'll be quite handy to have everything in one place. Now, as I said, I'll cover in more detail the usefulness of this display, and that is probably the single most important area that I'd like to explain to you, and for Zhentek to take note, because in the next release maybe they will give some consideration to what I have to say there. So here are all 4 of the displays put together so that you can compare and see for yourself just how useful they are. So I've taken you through elsewhere in the video quite a detailed look at this screen on the top left, but I'm going to cover it again because it is so critical, and because I'd really like to get this message through to Zhentek, because for me to continue using this, there are a few things that I actually need changed. So let's talk about this. The 2 displays on the left, the top left and the bottom left. Top left is the application running on my iPhone. I've taken you through how you load that, etc. In this part, I'm not going to take you through curve setting or about us. I'm just going to take you through the main menu, because that is where you will spend most of your time. So again, to repeat myself from another part of the video, this is too blingy and of not much use to me. It's okay to show me the voltage. I guess it is somewhat useful information. It's more useful to see the amperage. I don't need to see the dials. They just take up screen space for something that could be more important. What is really important here is the amp hours remaining. I would have preferred to see amp hours consumed, but amp hours remaining, amp hours consumed, not too bad. In fact, what I would suggest, and Zhentek, please take note of this, and I'd be very glad of anybody's opinions and make some comments here. I don't see why Zhentek could not change this display to show both the amp hours consumed and the amp hours remaining in clear, bold font. So this nice symbol of a battery is great. You can see it's mostly full. It's 85%, and the 85 is accurate, and is the right maths. But this 85 is tiny. It's not a big deal on the mobile application, on your phone app or your iPad or tablet or whatever. It's okay because you can see everything that you need to, as long as you have your specs on. But you know what? Even then, I've got to that stage, and a lot of motorhome owners have got to that stage where they have glasses on and off. So I don't use these for normal wear. I just use them for computer wear and reading. And I'd like to just whip my phone out, glance without having to find a pair of specs to see what this figure or this figure is. So make them bold, nice and bold. Let's just look at the SmartShunt, the Victron SmartShunt, very quickly, and then the daily BMS, and then we'll come back to, I think, the most important part of this, which is the display unit that sits in the van. The Victron SmartShunt, very simple. Everything is easily readable to me without having to get my specs on. And here you can see the state of charge is 89%. I don't know where they get 89% from, and again, somebody can help me with their maths. You know, if we were to get a calculator out, let's say we got 240, let's say 240 amp hours remaining divided by 280 to start with equals 85. So 85%, 86%. So this 85 here is actually a lot more accurate than this 89. I'm actually not sure where Victron get their 89% from. And again, somebody can help me out how they actually do that maths, because they've said, you know, we've got in the settings that it's a 280 amp hour battery, it's a 41 amp hours used, and they've got that percentage. I have no idea where that comes from. But the Victron SmartShunt does show quite clearly and easily, very easy to read the fact that you've consumed 41 amp hours. I don't care about the time remaining, because that's going to vary according to what your amps draw is, and that goes up and down all the time. So that to me is meaningless, as it is in the runtime there is meaningless as well. I want to know that 41 amp hours, I can see that I'm currently consuming 0.12 amps and 2 watts, and that's my voltage, and I don't really care about the voltage. As I said, it's meaningless to me. On a lithium iron phosphate, the curve is so flat for so long, I don't mind. I actually want to know how many amp hours I've got left. Anyway, the DALI app, the Smart BMS app is this, and they've got this great big dial and showing you 85%, which is same as the Zhentek SmartShunt, and again different from the Victron SmartShunt. So this and the Zhentek agree, and that's pretty much, sometimes I go and I look at the delta and the cells and that sort of thing, but pretty much even on the DALI BMS smart BMS app, all I'm cared about is percentage. I would have liked DALI to have told us how many amp hours are actually used in that, but they don't for some reason. Right, let's spend some time on this display on the bottom left, because it is so important. Now, I think, and Zhentek, if you're listening to this, there's a huge amount that you can do to improve this. So firstly, it is great to have a display, like a heads-up display, that you can just pick your head up, read the stuff without having to get your phone. So let's say you're watching a YouTube, you don't want to stop it on your phone, go look at the app, come back, and that sort of thing. You want to, or you're eating your food, you don't want to reach into your pocket and pull your phone out and go and find the app and load it and wait for the sync time, etc. You just want to glance up and see what the state of your battery is. To my mind, if you did this, it would make this thing usable. At this stage, I can't actually use this without actually walking all the way to it, and probably have to put my specs on because this is quite small to read it, and you've got a not that dark a black on a green background, and it's difficult to read this figure, and this 239 amps is more useful. But make this, in fact, 3 figures need to be big, bold, and easy to read from a distance across your van. The fact that the battery has 85% of its capacity left, the fact that 239, let's call it 240 amp hours remaining, and I would like to see the amp hours consumed. I know I can do the maths, but make it easy for me just to glance over and see my favorite figure. And that is really, I want to see how many amp hours I have used, is what I think of, and I've noticed quite a lot of people think in those terms. So Zhentek, you want to do 4 things that are really critical. 4 things. Number 1, show the percentage available clearly in big numbers, somewhere that's easy to read. Show the amp hours consumed very clearly. Show the amp hours remaining clearly, and show the current amperage draw quite clearly. It's not as important as the other 3, and you've made it pretty much the most important together with the voltage. If this was for lead acid, fine. This is not, most people who install this kind of thing will be lithium users, and they will want to see those figures that I've mentioned. So I would like to see you change this display. This thing here is useless to me. This thing here is useless. This is useless. Imagine showing in such a small display with such critical stuff that you are displaying, to waste such real estate with internal resistance. It's really meaningless for this. So make better use of this display by showing those 4 figures that I mentioned, and that will make it much more useful to have this display up in the van. At the moment, I don't use this display unless I am close by, and then I have to get my specs on so that I can read it. So Juntek, take note of that, please. Otherwise, the question is now, which application did I find that I was going back to time and time again on the trip? So we went away for about a week, 8 or 9 days, and we are quite heavy users. We run a coffee machine, a mini oven, a 12-volt compressor fridge that we converted to. We have a rice cooker for 2 people. We have an electric toaster. And we charge iPads and iPhones and MacBook Pros and all sorts of things all the time. We are definitely heavy users of power. So which one do you think we went to most of the time to see the state of the battery? And I can tell you the one on the top left is what I find myself going to time and time again. I'd absolutely love to tell you that we went to the Victron SmartShunt, but I did go to this quite a lot, just to, because this figure is great, but I can do the maths and minus it from that. But I did find myself going to this. If this display had been more useful and less cluttered with the more important stuff showing in bold, I would definitely have gone for this. That would have been my glance up, see what's going on, and carry on doing what I'm doing. I didn't often go to the Daily app because it takes quite a while to load up everything, and it just gives me a percentage, and then you'll see in some other places maybe that this percentage leaves you're left scratching your head wondering how on earth they arrived at that. And one thing I'll say with all of these is that when you reach 100% state of charge, they all stop negative counting. That was a big issue at one stage. They stopped negative counting, and they all show that the battery is 100% state of charge, which is great. So all of them work quite nicely in that regard. But my go-to was definitely this app, and I'm not sure why. I just found myself gravitating to that. It's quicker to load. The SmartShunt, you're always waiting just that bit longer for it to synchronize, whereas this is pretty instant. So it was a case of pull it out, load it up, glance at it, carry on doing what I'm doing. So to sum up, I'm impressed with that new Juntek SmartShunt. I think it's a good bit of kit. I think it's worthwhile installing. The basically 2 hassles. The first is that it is a bit of a bind installing because you've got to run these cables around in your van. And it would be nice if Zhentek could make them wireless. And the second is that the real attraction for me was the display that you can put in the van, so that it means you don't have to pull your phone out and disturb what you're doing. You can just glance over and have a look at the important figures. But because they make bad use of the real estate of that display unit, it makes it pretty much useless because you've got to go up close up to see what the important figures are. So if Zhentek could redesign that, I think it would be some really handy kit. But I would recommend that you get hold of it and install it. I think it is a very good contender to the Victron SmartShunt, which is the go-to that everybody buys. I think this SmartShunt of Zhentek could go very far, but I think that they need to do a little bit more work before it becomes mainstream. So thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful, and drop us a comment or two. And Zhentek, I'd love to hear from you guys as well.